So last week, my parents' neighborhood had a major power outage, and I found myself using every single power station that I own, which over the years has become quite a few. When that power outage happened, we were trying to divvy up all the different power stations. In that situation, I kept thinking to myself, where does each power station go which will be best for its situation? Because end of the day, you plug something into all these different battery stations and they're gonna work, they're gonna charge. And so I really wanted to take time today to make the video that I wish I had when I started this journey in van life and buying power stations, which is to directly compare all of the different major battery brands against each other in the big categories to help you figure out which one is best for the lifestyle that you are trying to use them for. So that is why today I'll be comparing the 5 biggest battery station brands' 1,000 watt-hour power stations. And those 5 big brands are going to be Anker, Jackery, EcoFlow, Bluetti, and Segway. And you may be asking yourself, Segway is not probably one of the biggest battery brands when you think about big VanLife power station brands, but I happen to own a Segway 1000, so I figured I would just throw it in there. And on that note, full disclosure up front, this video is not sponsored by any of these companies in any way. However, I have worked and been compensated by Anker, Jackery, and Segway in the past. But with that said, without further ado, let's get right into this graph comparing these power stations. So I've broken this down into 10 different categories today: capacity, expansion potential, price, life cycles, ports, charging time, operating temperature, warranty, size and weight, and noise. Let's jump right into this graph, starting with capacity. So I purposely chose the biggest battery brands and their batteries that are closest to 1,000 watt hours because I owned 3 of them. But I did want to make a note because Jackery actually has like 4 different 1,000 watt hour power stations. I chose for this video to talk about the V2 because that is what I own. But I did not want to do the Jackery 1000 because, well, the V2 has 3,200 more life cycles. And it charges so much faster from all 3 sources. And another reason I chose to go with the V2 is because it has a lithium iron phosphate battery, and the other option has a lithium ion battery. And so that's actually gonna make a huge difference. That is what's giving it the longer life cycle. It's gonna make it last longer. It's not gonna overheat. There is a huge difference in those 2 batteries. So that is why on this graph I chose the V2. But the other systems pretty much just have one option for your 1,000 watt hour power station, and I chose their most popular. All right, back to this chart. Let's start with the max input and output and why it's important. So input is the power consumed by the device, how much it takes in from a wall outlet, a solar panel, etc. The higher this number is, the faster it's going to charge at. On the other hand, the output is the maximum amount of watts or power that can be sent to something you plug into the device. So for example, with Anker, the max output is 1,800 watts. So you can power an 800 watt toaster, a 400 watt blender, but not a 800 watt microwave with all of those things at the same time. You cannot have things powering over that 1,800 watts. But you could do all 3 independently. So the higher this number is, the bigger the appliance you can plug into the device, or the more you can charge all at once. And the final number I'm showing you here is the surge, which is how much your battery can handle when there's a spike of power, which can happen sometimes when you plug in a device, that like first initial oomph. That explains it, I guess. And all 3 of those numbers can be found on whatever device you're trying to use. I won't go over each of these individually, but one note I want to make is I couldn't find Jackery's input online, so I messaged their customer service, which 2024, of course, was just AI, and they told me it was 800 watt AC input, and that didn't seem right when you put this into the chart next to the other numbers, and it's just so much lower than the others. I didn't write it, but they also did not include the input on the brief they actually sent me for when I made them their Jackery V2 video. So I don't know why they just don't want to include it anywhere in the public eye, but they don't. Probably because maybe it actually is 800. That would be insane. For me personally, this category just isn't enough to really pick a device by if you already know you want a 1,000 watt hour power station. I'm never plugging in more than 3 things at once personally, and I'm never really maxing it out. I'm using it in just realistic scenarios. I'm using it to charge a projector, to charge my phone, my fridge, just things away from my van. So know how you're going to use the power station, and that will help you figure out which categories are important to you. All right, second category is very important to me because I would say a big regret I had with my first power station was that I could not buy an expansion pack. So I was living in Vermont. I realized my 3,000 watt-hour power station was no longer working for me to live off of full time. I wished I had gotten a bigger one, but at the time, the Goal Zero did not have that option. I don't know if they have that option now, but I couldn't expand it. And so that is why when I look at power stations now, when I recommend power stations, I believe that if it can expand is a really big deal. So how this chart kind of works, for example, the Anker, you can buy an expandable battery that will add 1,056 watt hours to the original portable power station, and you can connect a maximum of one of those expandable batteries, which means the most power you can have for the system is 2,112 watt hours. And that individual expansion battery costs $500. So the reason Segway is in here is because I own it, and it made sense to include it because I have experience with it. But while you're seeing that it does have some of the biggest expandable battery potential, it's kind of annoying to expand, to be honest. So it's my mom's battery. It works for her and what she wants, which is she usually is going to take it on small camping outings, but what she really wants is a backup battery because I don't know why, but like wintertime, our house power goes out all the time. And so having that makes her feel really good with like a whole fridge going out of power. She has 5,000 kilowatt hours to be able to back that fridge up, which is great. But the way the Segway works is that you have to screw and unscrew it, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. When in comparison, like the Anker and the EcoFlow and the Bluetti, it's just a plug in the side, which is magical and just so much faster. So if you're like me and you're camping and you're living in a van, that's probably a better option if you plan on expanding and unexpanding it a lot. But I wouldn't, for me, the Segway just kind of seems like a lot of work. This video is going to be really long, isn't it? I'm sorry. I hope it's helpful anyway. But yeah, the Segway is great because it can go down to 1,000 kilowatt hours and all the way up to 5,000 kilowatt hours, and it's going to be very stable. So if you're carrying it around a lot at that 5,000 kilowatt hours, it might be nice because it's not like they're completely attached. So again, what do you want to do and what do you want to use that battery for? Something else you may be noticing here is that I did include stats for Jackery, even though the V2 does not expand at all whatsoever as of this moment. I want to make that super clear. So the only batteries by Jackery that do expand are the Jackery Explorer 1000 and 2000 Explorer Plus, nothing else. And the reason I wanted to include this in here is because these stats for the expandable batteries on the 1000 Explorer Plus are great. They're up there with Segway, and they're going to be cheaper to buy those expandable battery packs. So I thought that was super great. So yeah, the numbers for the Jackery's expandable battery pack for the Explorer 1000 are great. However, the V2 has none at all. So if you think you're never going to expand, then you're totally fine. I would just keep that in mind. Yeah, so I still wanted to include it. I wanted to let you know because if you are willing to pay more money and you want to go with Jackery, that is an option. Also, I did include prices on this graph, but they're changing constantly. One more thing before we move on from this section is that Bluetti has 3 different expansion battery sizes, but you can only plug one in at a time. So that's what the number before the max means. So you can't mix and match to make a bigger system like you can with Segway and Jackery. If you buy the smaller expansion battery and you want more later, you're gonna have to buy another battery that's not going to add on to the one you just bought, which isn't ideal. But if you get the 3,072 watt hour Bluetti expansion, you can get your system close to the size of Jackery. But the interesting thing about these is that you can actually charge your portable battery station with that expandable battery, so it will like charge it back. So if you don't want to lug the expansion, but you know your battery's at half and so you need that expansion, that's super great. Just recharge that up. You know, have some extra battery power on hand. If you're into that, that's great. And if I'm correct, that is the only battery brand that is doing that. I actually do not own any of the expansion battery packs. I've been trying to get Anker to send me one because I'm just a huge advocate of being able to expand battery banks. But I don't actually own one. So I don't actually know if you can charge the other ones like that or not. But I think that is exclusive to Bluetti, but if you know otherwise, please comment below. Next is probably the area a lot of people care about most, but since these are all 1,000 watt-hour power stations, they're all pretty close in price. These are all current sale prices, especially since I made this video around Prime Day. I tried not to actually use Prime Day sale prices, but power stations are just constantly on sale. They have huge Black Friday deals and Amazon Prime deals and like, oh, hey, look, it's Thursday. Oh, hey, look, John came to work. Let's give everyone a huge discount sales. Like, they just constantly left and right. But yeah, so if you don't need to buy a power station immediately, it's probably better to just stalk the page and wait a day or two or a week for a sale. All right, so our next category is life cycles, which is basically going to tell you how long you'll be able to actually use your battery for at full capacity. One charge cycle usually means 100% fully discharging the battery, so from 100% to 0%. So if you get the battery to 80% discharged and then you recharge it, then you're only actually discharging 20% or 20% of one full life cycle. And what I mean on this graph by 3,000 cycles until 80% capacity means that you can fully discharge it to 0% 3,000 times until the battery has only 80% of its original capacity. And here's another example of how these companies just kind of make things up. Segway says they have the highest cycles on the market, but Jackery has the same number, and Segway does not even say at what capacity it will be at after those 4,000 cycles. All right, so the next category is the number of ports and plugs for each device. Personally, I find that I never use all of the ports at once. This Jackery only has 3, but this one has 6. I've never really used more than 3 ports completely. So like my phone is charging, my computer is charging, and maybe I have the projector or I'm making dinner. It's all about knowing what you are going to use it for. So as you can see here, the EcoFlow has 15 plugs, and that is great, but again, for me, that's not really useful. I do like, though, that the Bluetti has a wireless charging pad on top. I love that. I wish these had it. And I just think it's so convenient. It's not enough for me to be like, all right, sold, that's, you know, that charging pad is gonna do it. But it is a factor that would actually make me look more in their direction. So, all right, the next category is charging time. All of the power stations on this list are able to be charged by AC outlets, your car alternator, and by solar panels. The big thing I want to note here is that there is a difference between fast charge and regular AC charging. Most of these battery stations have apps you can download and then turn on their version of fast charging, or Jackery actually calls it their emergency supercharge. And these make your charging time faster, but it's actually bad for the lifespan of the battery itself, and it should actually only be used in emergencies when you really need it. And that's probably why Jackery calls it emergency charge. So I just think overall it kind of helps these companies deceive buyers. So, you know, they can say that they can charge in an abnormal, crazy amount of time, which is just not what it's typically going to be. So for Anker, a normal AC outlet charging time is going to be 1.2 hours. For Jackery, it is 1.7 hours. EcoFlow is 1.3 hours, and Bluetti's website only says how long it takes to charge to 80%, so that's unhelpful. This actually super bothered me, so I went back and did so much searching and eventually found it takes 1.3 to 1.8 hours. But, you know, I think they do the 80% thing on purpose because these power stations tend to charge pretty fast when they're empty, but then some of them will actually take a little bit longer once you get close to that finish line of 100% and they're almost full. So they figure they can get a great time if you just go to 80%. But who wants to only ever charge their battery to 80%? Anyway, what I think is interesting is EcoFlow markets their charging as 7 times faster than their competition. And so do most of the others. I just want to know of what competition. You know, are they looking at like these knockoff, non-name brand ones? Where is this coming from? And even crazier, here on Bluetti, they put the competition stats for 100% and show theirs at 80%, which is definitely a red herring, essentially to trick you if you just look at this graph and not the numbers. But Bluetti says they charge in 1.3 to 1.8 hours for their AC charging, which is basically what they are saying the industry average is. They all just kind of make those big claims when they're all really fairly close, except Jackery. This is definitely Jackery's downfall area, is charging time. If you don't care about how long it takes to charge, if you've got all the time in the world, again, know thyself. All right, moving on from AC charging to car charging. This was the main way I lived off of my Anker Solix for 7 months in my van, and it took forever. It was very painful. I think the one time I drove 20 minutes and it added 4% battery to the station. It was grueling. It was terrible. It would take forever. And that's actually, if you're looking at these numbers, very common for power stations to take a while. And that's, that was the main way I was recharging it, and it wouldn't fit into my backpack. This is too big to be able to take in the gym. I tried to buy a big backpack for it. It didn't work. It is doing much better than the other options on this list, as you can see. And Segway didn't even say how long it would take to charge on their website at all. And they did include a car charging cord, though, which is very nice.
Bombastic side eye.
Because Jackery doesn't do that, which blows my mind. I do not get. And I think what makes me take a really big second look at the EcoFlow Delta 2 is that they will typically charge in about 10 hours by car. But if you purchase a 800-watt alternator charger, it will massively enhance the charging capabilities, and you can go from 0 to 100% in 1.3 hours, which is just a complete game changer if you are like me, living in a van and only really charging by the carport. And I was living in one space, right? So I'm not taking these big, long road trips. I'm driving to the gym 20 minutes. I'm driving to Walmart 20 minutes. So if I could go back, I might actually go for the Delta 2, knowing that information. However, the price of that alternator charger is the price of another battery, which is painful. So keep that in mind. It's great, but then it's expensive as heck. So, all right, next is charging from solar panels. And this is such a hard one to really put into numbers because it's really going to depend on, is it a sunny day? Are there clouds? What angle is your solar panel at? And I also have personally never used portable power station solar panels. I just got my first pair last week for the Jackery, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I have any experience in it because I don't. But the Anker with 600 watts of solar power will charge in 1.8 hours. So if you have only 200 watts, it would be 5.4 hours. The Jackery charges with 200 watt panels in 7.5 hours. And Segway only said the system can take a max of 800 watts of panels, but didn't specify charging time, and yeah, yada yada. And then I threw in this last category just for another breakdown, since usually these companies love to tell you how many times you can charge devices. So I picked the phone one because I think that's what people use the most. But I find it interesting that Anker says you can charge your phone 92 times on their 1,056 watt-hour power station, and Segway has 1,024 watt-hours, and they say 87, and Bluetti is 1,152 watt-hours, but it can only charge 62 times.
So basically what these companies are not disclosing of properly enough is that different types of phones pull different amount of watts. So I don't recommend trusting any of these numbers they give you, but instead look up your phone and do your own research.
Also, I just want to re-add and re-talk about the fact that the Bluetti can recharge from their expansion batteries, which does give you a fourth option from charging, which is really neat and unique. And if I'm correct, I don't think the other batteries do that. So that would give Bluetti a leg up here, I think, in this category. So on to our last sections of categories, starting with operating temperature. This is important to me because I literally used to have to plug in my hairdryer into my Goal Zero to then use to heat up my freaking power station in -4 degrees when I was living in my van in Vermont. It seems like all of these will charge down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit besides the Segway, which again, I do feel is more made for those small trips. And while Bluetti and Anker can discharge power better in colder weather, the Jackery and EcoFlow can handle the hotter weather a little bit better. So again, know thyself, know where you want to go, know what your plans are, and that can help you kind of figure out what's best for you. All right, moving on to warranty. These are pretty much all the same, except Jackery had to be weird and be unique and for some reason word it as a 3-year warranty with a 2-year extended warranty, whatever that means. But they're basically all 5 years. As for size and weight,
I actually made this graph using the dimensions of all 5 power stations to give you a side-by-side comparison of the size of each power station. And I linked this graph in the description if you want to check it out on your own.
And something else besides the actual weight that I think is important to this category is actually the handles, because this one is lighter, but I find that the one handle is just so much easier to carry because I do this and then just the way I'm carrying this weight becomes harder having 2 handles than having the one. So I actually prefer this handle. They're both flat in a way. This also adds space. So I really do think if they could get this kind of handle, it'd be a big deal. It'd be really great. But yeah, that's just a preference that I have, is that it's easier to carry the one handle versus the 2 on the side. The last category I wanted to include in this graph was how loud the fans on the battery stations can get when they're charging or discharging. So personally, with all of these, I have never noticed a noise. I did notice a noise with the Zendur battery that I had. I believe that was 1,000 watt hours, but it's been a while since I got rid of that. I did notice Anker does have some noise complaints if you look up reviews. I've never noticed anything, and I did see that they have done an upgrade to their newer batteries. I think that was like 2 years ago. I haven't noticed anything, so I do think that that issue is past us for the Anker. All right, and there you have it. That was my comparisons on each of these big brand power stations.
And just for fun, let's see which power station ranks as the best and which one ranks as the worst from these 10 categories.
Feel free to relook over this graph, make your own opinion, share your opinions and your experiences. I think that what it really comes down to, as I've been saying this whole video, is what are you going to be using the power station for? Like I've been saying, the Segway is right for my mom because of how she's using it for backup power and for a little bit of hiking. Anker was the right choice for me. However, going over this, I do wish that I had that fast charging that the EcoFlow has, or the wireless charging pad the Bluetti has. I wish that I could stack up to 5,000 kilowatt hours like the Jackery Explorer Pro or the Segway. I like how the Jackery has the handle and is the lightest option. So even though the Anker is for me, I know that I like some of the other aspects as well, and knowing those is just making me be able to make a more informed, expensive purchase. Each battery station really does have its pros and cons. If you don't like loud fans, then Segway might not be for you. Bluetti is a close second to it as well. And if you want to be in cold temperatures, then maybe Bluetti or Anker, who discharge in down to -4 degrees, is best. But if you plan on, being in hot temperatures, then maybe the opposite is true. And if you plan on mostly using solar power, then Anker is a great choice. If budget is most important to you, then Anker and EcoFlow are good options. If you want to use these batteries for a very long time, then Anker and Jackery are better than EcoFlow or Bluetti for those life cycles. So I think the next step after this video is definitely figuring out what's important to you. What are you going to be using this battery for? Because at the end of the day, all of these batteries have a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 5-year warranty, and thousands of people use them and make good reviews. Like, I love the Anker, but one of my favorite VanLifers who got me into van life is Vancity VanLife, and he loves the Jackery. I do believe that if there was one clearly better, we would know that by now. Each of these options are leading brands for a reason. That's kind of why I wanted to make this video. I started off being an Anker, a hardcore, die-hard fan. And then Jackery reached out to me and I started learning how they had changed, and I started liking this battery and some of the aspects. And so I just, I've always been using Anker. I just really wanted to break down, all these different batteries and all of these different options and figure out and be able to help share with you some of these things that could make making an option better for you. And I don't even know. I've been talking for an hour now. Words are just jumbling. I'm not even sure that that sentence made sense.